6 more stories of Enid Blyton's Winter Stories. Yes, it has been a while, but I am back. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for relaxing, and for falling asleep. Not many pages left now. Let's go. Scallywag's mistake. Look, here's Scallywag the imp again, said Mother Trotterhound. He's got a caravan now, and a little horse to pull it. But he hasn't got any furniture, said Mr. Tip-Tap. He's trying to earn some money to get some, and he's come to our village to see if we'll give him any work. Well, I won't, said Dame Snappy. He's lazy and cheeky, and he never does a job properly. Why, when I told him to paint my shed for me, he did 3 sides and left the back unpainted, just because he thought I wouldn't notice it. But I did. Yes, he's a lazy rascal, said little Miss Sharp-Eye. He won't get any work here, or in the next village either. My sister lives there, and she told me that Scallywag went into her shed when she was out and took all her garden tools away. We'll be careful of that tiresome little imp. So when Scallywag left his caravan up in the woods and came down to the village to look for work, he found none. No thanks, we don't want you here, said Mother Trotterhound, and shut her door with a bang. You go away, said Mr. Tip-Tap, and shook his stick at the cheeky Scallywag. Dame Snappy and Mrs. Sharp-Eye chased him away with their brooms, and that made him very angry. He badly wanted to buy some furniture for his caravan, which was very uncomfortable to live in without carpets, chairs, bed, or table. I want a little oil stove too, thought Scallywag. It's so very, very cold. Look at the white frost on the ground, and goodness gracious me, the village pond is frozen over with thick ice. No wonder I'm cold at night in my empty caravan. It certainly was cold weather. Scallywag shivered as he went round the cottages asking for work, but nobody would give him any. Nobody at all. He wasn't a nice person, and nobody liked him. One little bit. Now, when it was getting dark, Scallywag came to a dear little cottage at the end of the village. He knocked. There was no answer. No light shone out of the windows, so Scallywag thought there must be nobody in. Then a voice from the house next door called to him. Hey, little Miss Spindles has gone away for a few days. Who are you? Scallywag didn't answer. He crept round to the back. A sudden idea had come to him. He peered in at the window. It was almost too dark to see inside, but he could just make out bits and pieces of furniture. Furniture! Just what he wanted and hadn't got. And Miss Spindles was away, so if her furniture went away too, nobody would know for some time. It would fit furniture. He mustn't fetch his caravan, that was plain. He sat on the back step and thought hard. If he could take the furniture to some place bit by bit and hide it, then he could take his caravan there the next night and pick up all the chairs and things without anyone guessing what he was doing. But where could he hide the furniture? An idea came to him, and he grinned. Of course, I'll go to the pond. It's frozen over. I'll make a hole in it and poke in every bit of furniture. It will be well hidden under the ice. Nobody would possibly guess it was there. Then tomorrow I'll bring my caravan down to the pond side and say that it's a more sheltered place there, and in the night I'll go to the hole I made and fish out the furniture bit by bit, and away I'll go before dawn with it safely in my caravan. This seemed a very good idea to Scallywag. It wasn't long before he had found a window he could open. In he went and ran to the front door. He opened it from the inside and peered out. Nobody about at all. He brought out a little wooden chair and carried it to the pond. He made a hole in the ice and poked the chair into it. He tied a piece of string securely to it and left the string outside the hole. Then he went back to the cottage. He brought out a little wooden table and poked that down into the hole too, pushing it under the ice. He tied a table leg to the string from the chair. Then, when I come tomorrow night to collect everything, all I'll have to do is to pull the string, and the whole collection will come along to the hole, one bit of furniture after another, so that I can take each piece out. Thought Scallywag, how very, very clever I am. He brought another chair and a little sideboard to the hole. He had to make the hole a bit bigger for the sideboard, which was rather an awkward shape. Then back he went for another chair. And the grandfather clock too. It struck 8 as he carried it, and he was frightened in case anyone heard it. But nobody was about. He dragged Miss Spindle's dear little carved wooden bed along too, and that went down into the hole as well. He didn't bring the wardrobe because it really was too heavy. He pushed a stool, a small cupboard, and a little chest of drawers under the ice, all linked together with a long piece of string. What an idea! Then he went back and shut the door of the cottage. He crept up to the woods to his old caravan and went inside gleefully. Ha ha! Tomorrow night he would have it full of lovely furniture and would be off and away before anyone knew about its loss. But Miss Spindles happened to come home the very next day, and when she opened her front door, what a shock she got! Where was her hall chair? Where was her little cupboard? And what in the world had happened to her parlour chairs and table? And dear me, where was her old grandfather clock? And her little bed? She gave a loud wail and rushed to tell her next door neighbour. Soon the news was all over the village. Miss Spindle's furniture had gone. Someone broke in last night and took it. Find the thief! I wouldn't be surprised if it's that horrid Scallywag, said Dame Snappy. Let's go and look in his caravan. So they went, but, of course, there was no furniture there at all. Scallywag pretended to be angry. What? You come here and accuse me of taking furniture? I'll complain to the policeman. What a thing to say of an honest person like me. Wouldn't I have gone off in my caravan if I'd taken the furniture? And aren't I still here? Though all the same, I'm moving today, down beside the pond, because it's more sheltered there. You'll just stay away, you'll just stay where you are till we've made a few more inquiries, said Dame Snappy. So Scallywag had to stay in his caravan up in the woods, while everyone went rushing around to try and find the lost furniture. Scallywag didn't mind. He could easily move down to the pond when it began to get dark. But during that day, the weather turned warm. The wind blew from the south instead of from the north. The frost disappeared. All the frozen puddles melted. And the ice on the pond began to melt too. It cracked here and there. Puddles came on the thawing surface. The farmer's ducks came and tried the ice to see if they would soon be able to swim again. At about 3 o'clock, most of the ice had melted villagers saw strange things. "Look, what are all those things bobbing up and down about on the pond?" cried Mrs. Sharpeye, pointing. "There's something with 4 straight legs, and something else with a face. It's a clock, and that 4-legged thing is a wooden table upside down," said Mr. Tip-Tap. "Good gracious me, what a very, very peculiar thing." "And there's a chair, look," said Mother Trot-Around. "And is that a stool?" "Yes, it is." "My word, can all these things be Miss Spindle's lost furniture?" The village policeman, Mr. Plod, came and stared at all the bobbing bits and pieces. He looked at his notebook solemnly and nodded. "Yes, I can see most of the furniture that is reported in my notebook, even the little cupboard. My goodness me, who has thrown it into the pond? How wicked!" "Mr. Plod," said Dame Snappy, "that furniture went last night when the pond was frozen over. It must have been poked down through a hole in the ice and left there to be collected by someone." "Aha! That someone didn't guess that the ice was going to melt." "Who's the someone?" asked Mr. Plod. "We'll know that all right tonight," said Dame Snappy, "though we can guess now, most of us. Mr. Plod, let's all hide over there in those bushes and wait and see who comes to collect the furniture. He will come as soon as it is dark. No doubt about that." So away they went to the bushes, and half the village hid itself there, waiting for that someone to come. And presently there came the sound of wheels on the pond-side road, and in the darkness came Scallywag's caravan. He held a lantern over the pond to see if he could walk over the ice to the hole where he had hidden the furniture. But there was no ice now, only a stretch of water with lots of things bobbing up and down together on it. "Good gracious, who would have thought that the ice on the pond would melt so quickly?" groaned Scallywag. "It's a mercy nobody saw all the furniture floating around. Now I shall have to wade out and fetch it, and the water's so very cold." He took his lantern and waded into the pond. Oh, how cold the water was! He waded in past his waist, and at last came to a chair. He took hold of it. He began to walk back, and everything bobbed along behind him in a row, because it was all tied together. And when Scallywag had got everything out of the water, and had stood it on the bank, shivering as he did so, he heard a shout. He stopped untying the wet string, and listened in fright. "There he is, the thief! Catch him! He's got all the furniture! There he is!" And out of the bushes tumbled the villagers, their lanterns lit, with Mr. Plod in front. Scallywag ran to his caravan, but it was too late. Scallywag was surrounded. Mr. Plod took him by the shoulders. "You must come along with me," he said sternly. "I want to know how you got all Miss Spindle's furniture." "It was in the pond," stammered Scallywag desperately. "Oh, you don't think anyone made a hole in the ice last night and hid it there, do you?" said Dame Snappy, shining her lantern on Scallywag's scared face. "Dear me, that would be a dreadful thing to do," said Scallywag. "It certainly would. And what do you think should be done to a person who did a thing like this?" said Mr. Tip-Tap fiercely. Scallywag didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Mrs. Sharpeye tapped him smartly on the arm. "A person who does a thing like that should most certainly be punished. He should spend the night in prison, he should polish all the furniture when it's dry again, and he should work in Miss Spindle's garden for 4 whole weeks to make up for his wrongdoings," she said. "Don't you think so, Scallywag?" Scallywag nodded his head miserably. Oh dear, to think of the ice melting like that, how unlucky he was. Well, Scallywag was punished. He was put into prison for 3 nights, not 1. He had to polish up every bit of the stolen furniture when he came out, and it took him 3 weeks, because Miss Spindles was so very, very particular about it. And after that, he had to work 4 weeks in her garden for her, and sleep locked up in her shed each night, in case he went off before his time was up. "If I'd worked as hard as this before, I'd have earned plenty of money to buy myself furniture for my caravan," he groaned. "Perhaps it's better to work and be honest after all." Then, just as he was leaving the village at last, A cold spell came again, and ice covered all the puddles. Scallywag stared at it as he went to get his caravan. Horrid ice! Stupid, annoying ice! It was all your fault I got into trouble. I'll stamp on you. I'll smash you to bits. He stamped on a frozen puddle. It was so slippery that he lost his balance. His feet slid from under him, and he sat down with a bump. His horse took fright and galloped away with the caravan, leaving Scallywag sitting down on a frozen puddle, crying and wailing loudly. Get up, Scallywag. Be sensible. Work hard and honestly, and you'll be all right. And for goodness sake, go after your horse and caravan before you lose them forever. That's him told. The Proud Fir Tree. There was once a beautiful fir tree that lived in a wood. It was the only fir tree there, and it thought a good deal of itself. The other trees around it were oak and beech and hazel, and they were none of them quite so tall as the fir. Once some children had come into the wood and had seen the fir. Look, said the boy, see that fir? Hasn't it got a lovely straight trunk? Did you know that the masts of ships are made from fir tree trunks, Rosie? Are they really? Said Rosie, looking up at the straight trunk of the fir. Yes, and telegraph poles too, said the boy. Not many trees grow such fine straight trunks, Rosie. Well, the fir tree was tremendously proud to hear all this. It swayed about in the wind and made a little song up about itself. Telegraph poles are made from me, and the masts of ships that sail on the sea. The other trees got tired of this song. After all, a good many things are made from us too, said the oak. I make lots of beautiful furniture, and the beams and the roofs of many famous old buildings are made of oak. And I am used for heaps of things too, said the graceful beech. The gamekeeper comes and cuts his walking sticks from my branches, said the hazel. And even the little willow by the stream had something to say too. I helped to make cricket bats, it said. When the autumn came, the beeches and the oaks and all the other trees in the woods flamed into brilliant colour. You should have seen them. The beech was a mass of gold. The fir was quite jealous of them then. I suppose you think you are lovely, turning strange colours all of a sudden, it said. Well, the children think we are lovely, said the beech. They like to pick up some of my golden leaves and take them to school, and they pluck some of my sprays and press them so that they may have vases full of my golden leaves in the winter. Let me tell you this, said the fir. Every autumn you dress yourselves proudly in gold, red, brown and yellow, and then what happens to you? The frost comes along and loosens all your leaves, and the wind sweeps them off the boughs. Your fine dresses lie scattered on the muddy ground, and you are left bare and cold all through the winter days. That is quite true, said the oak. And what about me, said the fir. It is true that I don't dress myself up in yellows and reds, but I am sensible enough to keep my branches green all the winter long. I don't stand cold and bare and ugly. The other trees knew that this was true. They waved their bare boughs in the wind, while the fir waved her green-clad branches in pride. Are we really ugly now? Said the oak sadly. I wonder why we shed our pretty leaves. It does seem rather a waste to have to grow them every year. Perhaps the fir is more sensible than we are. After all, said the hazel, telegraph poles are made from me, and the masts of ships that sail on the sea, sang the fir tree. Now, that winter the sky suddenly became a strange grey leaden colour. The trees looked up, half afraid. Why is the sky so low and grey? Said the oak. I don't like it. And listen, the wind is getting up. A cold wind blew. The bare trees waved their branches and the fir trees shouted in the wind. Then snow fell. It fell steadily all the night long. It didn't stop once. The sky was full of snow. When the morning came, the wood looked so different. It was quite white. What a snowstorm, said the oak, shaking its sturdy boughs. The snow fell off at once. But the oak's branches were soon white with snow again, for there was still plenty of snow to come. All day long it fell, and on the hills it was more than 3 feet deep. Then the fir tree began to grumble loudly. Oh, this snow! Oh, this heavy, heavy snow! I can't bear the weight of it any longer. Well, shake it off then, as we do, said the oak. How can I, said the fir tree crossly. You have bare branches, so that the snow cannot cling to you, as it can to my green branches. I hold the snow with all my boughs. Oh, how heavy it is! Stop snowing, sky! I can bear the weight no longer. But the snow went on snowing. Then there came a loud All the trees were startled. What could it be? They could see nothing. I'm afraid I am breaking, said the fir tree sadly. That was one of my branches. Another branch broke. The fir tree shivered. A mass of snow slipped down from its branches. Good gracious, the fir tree will be broken to bits, said the oak. I do hope the snow soon stops. It stopped very soon. Then the weather turned warmer and all the snow melted. The trees stretched themselves and looked at the fir tree. Poor thing. All its beautiful branches were broken and hung sadly down. One was already on the ground. It was no longer beautiful. Why did I boast that I kept my leaves, said the fir tree sadly. If I had thrown them down as you did, oak tree, the snow would have slipped easily from my boughs, and they would not have broken beneath the great weight of the snow. Oh, what an unhappy tree I am! I am ashamed of my looks now. I shall never, never sing my little song again. We will grow our branches more closely around you to hide your broken sides. Promised the beech. After all, you still have a fine straight trunk. So the other trees grew their branches quite close to the fir, and hid the places where his dead branches had fallen off. He was grateful and friendly. Well, fir tree, you may not be so beautiful now, but you are much nicer to know, said the oak next summer, when his leaves whispered by the thousand. That's something, said the fir tree, stretching his high head to the sky. That's certainly something. The winter wide awakes. Mother put her head in at the nursery door and saw a very cosy scene. There was a big fire burning, and 3 children were sitting by it. 2 were playing a game of snap, and the other was reading. Do you know who's here? She said. Auntie Lou. Oh, said all 3 children, raising their heads. They were Tessie, Pat, and Johnny. Tessie looked a little doubtful. I hope she hasn't come to take us for a walk, she said. Auntie Lou is lovely to go for walks with in the summer, but it's all snowy outside now and very cold. I don't think I want to go out today. Another head came round the door. It belonged to Auntie Lou. She was dressed in warm tweeds and had a bright red scarf round her neck. Her head was bare and her cheeks were as red as her scarf. Her blue eyes twinkled. What's this I hear? You don't want to go out with me? Well, I like that. Who came and begged to go out with me every week in the summer? Who went to find conkers and nuts and blackberries with me in the autumn because I knew all the best places? We did, said Pat with a grin. But Auntie Lou, we're so warm and cosy here, and there's nothing to see in the country now. Honestly, there isn't. There's nothing but snow, said Johnny, and all the birds are gone and all the animals are asleep. What a poor little ignorant boy, said Auntie Lou, making a funny face. It's true we shouldn't see anything of the winter sleepers. They're all tucked away in their holes, but we could see plenty of wide awakes. Who are they? asked Johnny. Well, as I came over the fields this morning to pay a call on 3 lazy children, I saw a beautiful red fox, said Auntie Lou. He wasn't asleep. He almost bumped into me coming round the hedge. I didn't hear him, and I suppose he didn't hear me. Oh, a fox, said Pat. I'd like to have seen that. Auntie, I'll come with you if you show me all the wide awakes. We'll all come, said Tessie, shutting her book. I'd like to find some wide We've still plenty left, haven't we, Auntie? Plenty, said her aunt. Hurry up then. I'll give you 3 minutes to put on your boots and coats. They were all ready quickly, for they knew perfectly well that Auntie Lou wouldn't wait for anyone who wasn't. They set off down the snowy garden path. You can see how many birds have been in your garden this morning, said Auntie Lou, pointing to some bird tracks in the snow. Look, that's where the sparrows have been. See the little footmarks all set out in pairs, and there are the marks of a running bird. His footmarks are behind one another. Johnny hopped with his feet together and then ran. He saw that he had left his first footmarks in pairs, but the other marks were spread out behind one another. Auntie Lou laughed. The footmarks of the Johnny bird, she said. By the frozen pond they came to other bird prints, and Tessie pointed to them. Ducks, she said. You can see the marks of the webbing between their toes. Yes, the poor things thought they might have a swim on the pond, and came waddling up from the farm to see, said Auntie Lou. I wonder what they think when they find they can't splash in the ice. They left the pond behind and struck across the fields. How lovely they were, all blanketed in snow. The hedges were sprinkled with snow too, but here and there the red hips showed the green, unripe ivy berries. Look, Auntie, said Pat, pointing to some bark in the hedgerow, which had been gnawed white. Who's been doing that? Somebody must have been very hungry to eat bark. One of the most wide awakes, said Auntie Lou. She pointed to some tracks. Look, rabbit footmarks. The bunnies have been gnawing bark because they are so hungry. But why don't they eat the grass? Said Tessie. The two boys laughed at her. How can they when it's deep down under the snow? Said Pat scornfully. Use your brains, Tessie. Oh, I never thought of that, said Tessie. Poor little rabbits. They must get awfully hungry when their grass is hidden away. No wonder they come and gnaw at the bark. Yes, and the fox knows they will come out to feed somewhere, said Auntie Lou. So he comes out too, and pads along quietly in the snow, watching for an unwary rabbit. I saw a sad little scattering of grey fur this morning as I came along, to show me where the fox had made his breakfast. Look, what's that? Suddenly whispered Johnny, clutching at his aunt's arm. She looked where he was pointing. A stoat, she said. He's after the rabbits, I expect. But he's white, said Johnny, amazed. He wasn't white when we saw him in the summer. Ah, he's clever. He changed his dark coat for a white one in the winter when the snow came, said his aunt. Oh, but the tip of his tail, which is black. Now his enemies can't see him against the white snow. Isn't he clever? Said Pat. He's cleverer than the fox. He doesn't change his red coat to white. Does the stoat always change his coat, Auntie Lou? Only in cold climates, said his aunt. Not down in the south, where it is warmer and there is little snow in the winter. Now look, what's that? A weasel, said Pat. He's wide awake too, isn't he? Look at him, going along almost like a slinky snake. He's a fierce, lively little fellow. They went by another farm. The farmer was standing at the door of his cowshed and hailed them. Good morning. It's a fine morning for a walk, isn't it? It's a pity I can't send my cows out for a walk too. They're tired of standing in their sheds. Farmer Tom's, have you lots of mice and rats about? Asked Johnny. We're out looking for wide-awake creatures today. Wide-awake creatures today. And we've seen plenty, but we've seen no rats nor mice. Ah, I've too many, far too many, said the farmer. Up in the loft there, where I store my grain, I get no end of the creatures. You go up and maybe you'll see some. They all climbed the ladder and went into the dark loft. They sat down on sacks and kept quiet. Almost at once they heard a squeaking. Then two mice appeared from a hole and scampered over to a bin. There are two, called Tessie. But her voice frightened them, of course, and they turned to run away. Then a rat suddenly appeared and made a dart at one of the mice. Tessie gave a squeal. Oh, a rat. Horrid, sharp-nosed thing. Auntie, I don't like rats. Let's go down. The mice disappeared, and the rat slunk away too. He was a thin rat and looked very hungry. Perhaps he wasn't very clever at catching mice. Nobody liked the look of him. The rat is every animal's enemy, and ours as well, said Auntie Lou. I haven't anything good to say of him. We should get rid of him the shed. The cows smelled nice and turned their big heads to look at the children. "Where are your sheep?" asked Johnny. The farmer waved his hand up to the hills. "Away up there in the snow with the shepherd," he said. "He's got them safe and is expecting their little lambs soon. They're often born in the snowy weather, and they're none the worse for it. You must go and see them when they are born. The children left the farm and went on their way. "I wouldn't have believed there was so much to see on a snowy, wintry day," said Tessie. "I really wouldn't. Why, it's as interesting as summertime. Look, there's a thrush and a blackbird too." "Eating the hips in the snowy hedge," said Pat. "Aren't they enjoying themselves? What a good thing there are berries to feed the hungry birds in the winter. And look at all those chaffinches," said Tessie, as a flock of the bright little birds flew over her head towards the farm. "I've never seen so many chaffinches together before." "No, in the spring and summer they go about in pairs," said her aunt, "but many birds in winter like to flock together. They are probably going to see if there is any grain around about the farm for them to pick up. Look up into the sky. You'll see some other birds there that flock by the thousand." "Peewits," said Johnny. "Don't their wings twinkle as they fly? I do love their call too, just like their name." "I should think we've seen all the winter wide awakes there are now," said Tessie, but Auntie Lou shook her head. "No, there's another. I saw him this morning as I came through the hazel wood. He has been asleep, but this lovely sunny day woke him up. He doesn't mind the snow a bit. Look, there he is, the pretty thing." A squirrel suddenly bounded down a tree trunk and ran right over to the children. Auntie Lou put her hand in her pocket and took out a few shelled nuts. "Here you are," she said to the amusing little squirrel. "I've shelled them for you, so you won't have any bother today." The squirrel took a nut from her fingers, skipped away a few paces, then sat up with a nut in his paws and began to eat it quickly. The children watched him in delight. "He's a great friend of mine," said Auntie Lou. "If he's awake and I walk through this wood, he always comes along to me to see if I've anything for him. I expect he has plenty of nuts and acorns hidden away, but he does love a peanut or Brazil nut already shelled for him. It makes a change from his own nuts." "Let's take him home. Oh, do let's take him home," said Johnny, and he tried to catch the bushy-tailed squirrel, but in a choice the little creature ran up a nearby trunk, his tail out behind him, and sat high above their heads, making a little chattering noise. "His home is up in that tree," said Auntie Lou. "I've no doubt he has a very cosy hole there. Save it from little boys who want to take him home with them." "Oh, I do like him," said Johnny. "Perhaps in the spring, when he has tiny young squirrel children, I could have one of those. I'd love a squirrel pet. I'd call him Scamper." The squirrel disappeared into his home. Auntie Lou began to walk through the trees. "It's time we went home too," she said. "Look how the sun is sinking. It will soon be getting dark. Come along." They ran after her, looking about for more squirrels, but they saw none. Johnny made up his mind to go to the woods the very next day and make friends with the little squirrel all by himself. He's the nicest winter wide awake we've seen," he said. "What a lot we've met today, Auntie. I'd no idea there were so many birds and animals to see on such a wintry day." It began to get dark. "We shan't see any more now," said Tessie, but they did. As they walked down the lane home, a little bird kept pace with them, flying from tree to tree as they went, giving them little bursts of song. "It's a robin," said Auntie Lou. He is always the latest bird to bed. Maybe he's the one that belongs to your garden, children. Look out for him tomorrow and scatter some crumbs for him." "We will," said Tessie, opening the garden gate. The robin flew in before her. "Yes, he must be ours. He has come to welcome us home, Auntie. You're coming in to tea, aren't you?" "Of course," said Auntie Lou. "I think I deserve a very nice tea, with hot scones and homemade jam, after taking you 3 children out to see so many wide awakes." You do," chorused the children. And she did, didn't she? I hope you'll see a lot of wide awakes if you go out on a winter's day. The children all lived next door to Mr. Twiddle, who made a fine snowman in his garden. Mrs. Twiddle said they might, because the Twiddles' garden was so much bigger than theirs. So the children were very pleased, and they built a big man, quite as tall as their daddy, and very fat and round. Mrs. Twiddle, can we have an old hat for his head and an old scarf for his neck? Called the children, looking in at the kitchen window, where Mrs. Twiddle was making cakes. Yes, said Mrs. Twiddle, you'll find an old hat in the hall and a ragged old scarf somewhere by it. And if you look in the hall drawer, you'll maybe find an old pair of gloves too, for the snowman's cold hands. Oh good, shouted the children, and they tore off to get the clothes. They found them all, and they found Mr. Twiddle's stick too, which they borrowed for their funny old snowman. My word, he did look grand when he was finished and dressed up. You should have seen him, with Mr. Twiddle's old hat on his head, a scarf tied loosely round his fat neck, raggedy gloves on his round hands, and a stick through his arm. Really, he looked very fine indeed, and the children were proud of him. Mrs. Twiddle looked out of the window and laughed. He just wants a pipe to stick in his mouth, she said. Then he'll be happy. Here is one of Mr. Twiddle's. So the children stuck a pipe in the snowman's mouth and then danced round him, laughing. Their mother rang the tea bell next door, and they hurried off, hungry and happy, wondering what Mr. Twiddle would say when he saw their wonderful snowman. Well, Mr. Twiddle didn't come home till it was almost dark, for he had been to see his brother in the next village. He stumped in at the front gate, tired and hungry, and then he suddenly saw the old snowman standing quite still in his front garden. Hello, said Mr. Twiddle in surprise. Who's that? What are you doing here, my good man? Hello, said... The good man didn't answer. Mr. Twiddle grew cross. You needn't think I can't see you standing there, trying to hide from me in the darkness, he said. You are up to no good, I'll be bound. What are you waiting there for? The snowman said nothing at all. Mr. Twiddle marched right up to him and looked at him closely as he could in the half-darkness, and he saw that the snowman had got his hat on. You've got my hat, he said in a rage. My dear old comfortable hat. How dare you take my hat? Give it to me at once. The snowman didn't give it to Mr. Twiddle. He just stood quite still and stared at him out of his big stone eyes. And you've got my scarf on, I do declare, roared Mr. Twiddle. Yes, you have. What next, I'd like to know? I suppose you've been sneaking round my house, just taking whatever you can. Put your hands on. I'll fetch a policeman. I'll give you such a smack that you'll land in the next door garden. The snowman stared and said nothing. Can't you answer me? Shouted Mr. Twiddle. Haven't you got a tongue in your head? The poor old snowman hadn't got a tongue of any sort, so he couldn't say a word. He just stood there in Mr. Twiddle's hat and scarf, looking very large and miserable. And if you haven't got my gloves and my stick, cried Mr. Twiddle, suddenly seeing them in the darkness and feeling them. This is too much. My hat, my scarf, and now my gloves and my stick. You are a wicked robber, and if you don't give me back my things at once, this very minute, I'll go out and get a policeman, now. The snowman didn't move. Then a bit of snow melted by his mouth, and his pipe fell out. Mr. Twiddle picked it up. And you've got my pipe too, he shouted. My very nicest, oldest pipe. What next? Are you wearing my vests and my socks and my best shirt under that large white overcoat of yours? Oh, you bad, wicked robber. Just then the village policeman came by and heard this shouting. He walked into the front garden. Now then, what's all this? He asked. Oh, policeman, I'm glad you've come, said Mr. Twiddle. This robber won't give me back my clothes that he's stolen. He won't even say a word to me. Mr. Twiddle suddenly slipped on the snow and fell against the snowman. He clutched at him, and one of the snowman's stone buttons fell off and hit Mr. Twiddle sharply on the nose. Oh, you wicked fellow, you hit me, shouted Mr. Twiddle in a rage. Take that, and that, and that. He pushed the snowman, and the snow fell off in big pieces. Mr. Twiddle was astonished. He hit the snowman, and the funny old snowman began to fall to bits. Mr. Twiddle fell on top of him and floundered about in the snow, shouting and smacking. The policeman pulled him up just as Mrs. Twiddle came to the door in astonishment, holding a lantern to see what was the matter. Twiddle, what you doing?" she called. "Are you being rude to the policeman?" "No, madam, he isn't," said the policeman with a grin. He's fighting a big snowman and breaking him all to bits." "Really, Mr. Twiddle?" said Mrs. Twiddle in surprise. "Must you do a thing like that? And look at the mess you're in. Good gracious me, and now you've spoilt your new hat and broken your nice new stick." "Well, you'll have to use your old ones again. The snowman has got them, so you can bring them in with you before he melts all over them." Poor Mr. Twiddle, he couldn't think of a word to say, not a word. He went into the kitchen all covered with snow, and Mrs. Twiddle shooed him out again. "I'm not going to let you cover my nice kitchen floor with melting snow," she cried. "Shake yourself in the yard, please, and chop up your broken stick. It will do for firewood." Mr. Twiddle went to the woodshed very gloomily. He took the chopper, and oh dear me, he chopped up his hat, and then went to hang his broken stick on the peg. There really is no knowing what he'll do next. What a good thing! "You can all go out for a walk this morning," said Mother to Jean, Harry and Peter. "It's a lovely day." "Oh, good," said Jean. "Can we go down to the river, Mother? There may be a few boats out." "Very well," said Mother. "But just you be very careful as not to fall in." "It's so nice and sunny," said Peter. "I guess we'll be as hot as can be. Need we put our coats on, Mother?" "Of course you must," said Mother. "It isn't summer now. And scarves, please. There's a cold north wind blowing, and I certainly don't want you all in bed with colds." "Oh, Mother, scarves too. We shall be cooked," said Harry. "Well, you must be cooked then," said Mother firmly. "Coats and scarves, please, and no nonsense." The children were cross about the scarves. They all hated scarves and gloves and Wellington boots, and simply would not put them on if they could get out of it. They went to the cloakroom and took down their coats. Just then the doorbell rang, and Jean peeped into the hall to see who it was. "It's Mrs. Jones," she said to the others. "She'll keep Mother talking all morning. We'd better not go and say goodbye. We'd better not go and say goodbye, or she'll keep us talking too." "We can slip out of the back way then," said Harry. "Come on, everyone. I say, as Mother won't see us go, shall we forget to put our scarves on?" said naughty Peter. "It's so hot." "It is hot," said Harry. "We really shall be cooked in them, but Mother did say we were to put them on." "But she won't know if we don't," said Peter. "Peter, don't be so perfectly horrid," said Jean. "You know Mother trusts us to do what she says. I call that downright deceitful. It's just simply dreadful of you. Anyone would think you didn't love Mother when you talk like that." "Well, I do," said Peter sulkily. "You better show it then," said Jean, tying her long woolen scarf firmly round her neck. Harry tied his scarf on too. Looking rather red, Peter stood sulkily in the cloakroom. The others didn't wait for him. They ran out into the garden and made their way to the gate that led into the lane. After a minute, Peter joined them. Harry and Jean looked at his neck. He had tied his scarf round just as they had. Jean was glad. It made her angry and unhappy when Peter was deceitful. She took his arm. "Good old Peter," she said. But Peter was still rather sulky, and he shook off Jean's arm. So she let him walk by himself and ran on ahead with Harry. They soon came to the river. There had been a lot of rain, and the river was swollen and ran very fast. The children threw bits of stick into it and watched them whirl away. Soon they met George and Mary and began to play games with them. George had a ball, and the children stood in a ring and threw the ball to one another. If somebody missed, they had to kneel on one knee. If they missed again, they had to kneel on both knees. It was such great fun. Suddenly the ball went crooked, and Mary couldn't catch it. It rolled away and away, right to the edge of the river. Mary raced after it, afraid it would roll right into the river. But it didn't. It stopped just at the edge. Mary stooped to pick it up, and caught her foot on a root. She fell, rolled down the bank, and splash! There she was in the river. George gave a scream. "Mary can't swim! Mary can't swim! Quick! Oh, do come and save her!" The four frightened children raced to the river been swept out a little way and had caught hold of an old branch that had fallen into the bed of the river and stuck there. It just saved her from being swept right away with the current. Save me, said Mary. This branch won't last very long. It's cracking already. If only we had a rope, cried Harry in despair. How can we save Mary? There's no one about. Oh, what shall we do? What shall we do? The branch that Mary was clinging to gave a loud crack. Mary screamed, Quick, quick! The river is taking me away. The branch is breaking. Jean, Harry, take off your scarves and give them to me, cried Peter suddenly, tearing his own scarf off his neck. Quick, I'm going to knot them together, and then I think they would just reach Mary. The three children tore off their long woolen scarves. Peter knotted them all together quickly and tightly. Then, with the other children holding on tightly to his waist so that he should not fall in, he bent over the bank and swung the scarf rope right out over the river to poor Mary. The branch broke in two. The little girl was swept away, but she just managed to snatch at the scarf rope. She held on as tightly as she could, and Peter held on too. Hold tight, he yelled. I'll pull you in, but do hold tight. The scarves are very strong. With the others holding him fast, the little boy pulled hard at the scarf rope. Slowly Mary came nearer the bank. At last she reached it. Peter lay flat and reached his hands to her. She was pulled up to the grass above, dripping wet, frightened and cold, but safe. Oh, thank you, Peter, sobbed Mary. Even George was crying, for he had been very frightened. You are so clever. However did you think of making a rope with those scarves? Oh, Peter, just suppose you hadn't worn your scarves today. We almost didn't, said Peter in a small voice. I think I was rather mean about it, but I'm jolly glad I did just what Mother said now. So are we, cried Harry and Jean, and they both gave Peter a big hug. Come on, Mary, you must get home straight away and be dried. So off they all went, and you know, they never forgot that they saved Mary's life by obeying their mother that morning. You simply never know, do you? Brer Rabbit lays in his winter stores. Now, one time the winter set in very early, and the creatures couldn't seem to find enough to eat. Brer Fox got as thin as a broom handle, and Brer Rabbit was just a bag of bones. One day they met in the road and began to talk. Bad times, Brer Rabbit, bad times, said Brer Fox. You've got nothing to grumble at, Brer Fox, said Brer Rabbit. You've got a horse and cart, and I've got nothing except my old wheelbarrow. What's the use of a horse and cart, said Brer Fox. You just tell me that, Brer Rabbit. What's the use of a horse and cart when you've got nothing to carry in it? Why, I used to go to the town and bring back my cart full of food, but now the horse is lazing in the field and the cart is lying idle in the shed. That's bad, said Brer Rabbit. Why don't you sell your horse and cart, Brer Fox, and buy food with the money? I'm surprised that a clever man like you hasn't thought of that before. Well, Brer Fox thought it over, and he reckoned it was a mighty good idea. Having a horse and cart wouldn't help him if he was dying of hunger. Well, said Brer Fox, that's a good idea, Brer Rabbit, but if I go to town and sell my horse and cart to buy food, I'll have no cart to bring it home in, and no horse to pull it, so I'll be no better off than before. Well, Brer Fox, said Brer Rabbit, I don't mind giving you a hand over this. I'll lend you my wheelbarrow to bring your shopping home in. We can put the wheelbarrow in the cart when we set out, and after you've sold your horse and cart, you can buy food with the money and put it into my barrow. We can take turns in wheeling it home. That's mighty good of you, Brer Rabbit, said Brer Fox. I'll do that. Meet me at the corner of the road tomorrow morning, and we'll set off for town. So the next morning, the two of them set off in the cart. Brer Fox clucked to his horse, and they galloped into the town. Pretty soon Brer Fox had sold the horse and cart, and had money to jingle in his pockets. My, the food he bought! It just made old Brer Rabbit's mouth water, so it did. A sack of rice, a sack of corn, a sack of coffee, a sack of turnips. It all went into the barrow. You take a turn at wheeling the barrow first, Brer Rabbit, said Brer Fox. My arms ache from driving the horse. Brer Rabbit lifted the handles of the barrow. My, but it was heavy. Brer Rabbit puffed and panted, and Brer Fox grinned to see him. Brer Fox walked fast, and Brer Rabbit couldn't keep up with him. He did his best, but Brer Fox always seemed to manage to keep so far ahead that Brer Rabbit couldn't shout loudly enough to him to make him hear. Well, at last Brer Rabbit's arms were aching so much that he had to put the barrow down. Hey-yo, Brer Fox, he yelled. You come along back here. It's your turn now. Brer Fox went skipping along in front and didn't so much as turn his head. Brer Fox! Brer Fox! You come along back here, yelled Brer Rabbit. I'm not going to wheel your food all the way home. You give me my share for helping you, and I'll take it and go. Brer Fox heard that all right. He turned round and grinned at Brer Rabbit. The food's mine, he shouted. I may give you a handful of rice, Brer Rabbit, but that's all you'll get. Ha! Someone else can play tricks as well as you. Brer Rabbit thought mighty hard, he did. Then he shouted to Brer Fox. All right, Brer Fox, just give me my handful of rice and I'll be off. But you might pop into Bear's house just over there and ask him for a little bag to put my rice in. I can't carry it in my paws very well. So Brer Fox, grinning to himself and feeling mighty pleased with things, popped along to Bear's house and borrowed the smallest bag he could. Now as soon as Brer Fox was out of sight, Brer Rabbit took hold of the sack of rice and pulled it out of the barrow. He hid it under a bush, but before he left it there, he put his hand in at the top and got the handful of rice grains out. He ran back to the barrow and then set off in the opposite direction, dropping the rice as he went. Then back he went to the barrow again and sat down by it, pretending to cry. By and by, Brer Fox came back with a small bag, and when he got there he saw Brer Rabbit crying. My, but he was boo-hooing. In the name of goodness, Brer Rabbit, what's the matter? Said Brer Fox. Matter enough, said Brer Rabbit. I wish you'd stayed here instead of going off, Brer Fox. What's up then, Brer Rabbit? Oh, a man came, Brer Fox, and stole your lovely bag of rice, sobbed Brer Rabbit. I ran after him, but he went too fast for me. Which way did he go, Brer Rabbit? There's the way he went, Brer Fox. There's where he dropped the rice out of the sack as he ran. If you're quick, Brer Fox, you'll catch him. Brer Fox dropped the bag he carried and tore off, hoping to catch the man that Brer Rabbit spoke of. He was hardly out of sight when Brer Rabbit caught hold of the bag of coffee and carried that away to the bush and hid it too. He put his hand into the top of the sack, took out some coffee beans, ran back to the barrow, and then set off in the other direction, dropping the beans as he went. It looked just as if someone had ran there with a sack, dropping beans out of it as he ran. After a while came Brer Fox, a puffing and a panting. He hadn't seen any man at all. Brer Rabbit shouted to him, You haven't come a minute too soon, Brer Fox. While you were gone, another man came and carried off the coffee. See, that's the way he went, Brer Fox, and if you're quick, you'll catch him. Well, Brer Fox set off again as fast as he could, and he ran and ran, but he didn't see any man at all. While he was gone, Brer Rabbit carried off the sack of corn and sprinkled some grains in the opposite direction again. Then Brer Fox came back, shouting that he hadn't seen anyone, and Brer Rabbit yelled to him to say that another man had been and had carried off the corn. Well, this suddenly seemed mighty strange to Brer Fox, all these men coming by that way in a lonely place and stealing out of his barrow. He wondered if maybe Brer Rabbit was up to one of his tricks, so when he ran off, pretending to chase the man again, he didn't go very far, but turned around and crept back to see what Brer Rabbit was doing, and it was just in time to see Brer Rabbit pulling at the sack of turnips in his barrow. Well, Brer Fox was mighty tired with running hither and thither, and backwards and forwards, but he felt so mad when he saw what Brer Rabbit was up to, Daddy dashed up to him and shouted at him. "What are you going to do with that sack of turnips?" he yelled. Brer Rabbit put the sack down and looked very upset. He looked at Brer Fox as if he felt mighty sorry for folks who asked such foolish questions. He shook his head, he did, and said, "Well, well, well, who would have thought Brer Fox would have come yelling at me like this, when anyone would guess I was just carrying it off to say for him, so no man could steal it." But this sort of talk didn't deceive Brer Fox, and he snarled so fiercely that Brer Rabbit thought it would be better to run, and run he did, with Brer Fox at his tail between the trees, and at last Brer Rabbit came to a hollow tree, and in he went. "Just you watch this hole for me, Brer Buzzard," said Brer Fox. I'm going to fetch some fire to smoke old Brer Rabbit out." Well, Brer Fox set off, and Brer Buzzard settled down beside the hole, and after a bit Brer Rabbit sang out, "I've got the better of you, Brer Buzzard, I surely have." "How's that, Brer Rabbit?" said Brer Buzzard. "Because I can see you, and you can't see me," said Brer Rabbit in his most cheeky voice. With that, Brer Buzzard stuck his head in the hole of the tree and looked up to see Brer Rabbit, and no sooner did he do this than Brer Rabbit flung a handful of sand down into his eyes. Poor Brer Buzzard, he blinked and he winked, but he couldn't get the sand out, so down to the stream he went to wash his eyes, and while he was gone, Brer Rabbit came down out of the hollow tree and raced back to the barrow. It wasn't long before he had taken the sacks of corn, rice, and coffee out from under the bush where he had hidden them, popped them into the barrow with the sack of turnips, and trundled away merrily to his home. And my, didn't Brer Fox shake his fist when he passed by Brer Rabbit's house the next day, and smelt fried rice cakes and fresh coffee. Ah, it's no use trying to trick Brer Rabbit. No, no, no. Ah, that is the end of this edition of ASMR Storytime. Thank you so much for watching, listening, relaxing, and hopefully falling into a nice, deep sleep. Sleep, 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 sleep. Thank you so much again for watching, listening, and falling asleep. Hopefully. I will have 6 more stories. 6 last stories of this book to come very, very soon. So with that in mind, have yourselves a good night. Sweet dreams. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. And remember, if I don't see you before, I will see you the next time I see you. Good night. Good night. Good night.